After about 2 years, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is finally here. And I can't stop thinking about this movie. I saw it last night during an early preview screening, and I am still so excited about it. And I want to talk about it while it's still fresh in my mind. So if you haven't seen the movie already, please make sure you see it, because this video is going to be full of spoilers. So let's get into it. Before I get started, I do want to take a moment to thank my channel members. This video shoutout goes to Doomhorse. Thanks again, Doom. I really appreciate you, man. And if you'd like to have your name featured here and have a possible shoutout, please consider becoming a member by hitting the join button. And thank you to my patrons too. The support means a lot and it allows me to keep creating content. And even if you can't become a member, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the bell. It all helps so much. And without further ado, let's get back into the video. Alright, so before I get into Sonic 3, I think it's really important that I talk about Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 really quickly. So, Sonic 1. Sonic 1 came out in 2020, and I think it was a really good movie. I really enjoyed it. I think it was simple, to the point. I enjoyed Sonic and Tom's chemistry. Jim Carrey absolutely stole the show. I mean, he basically carried the first movie. Everybody pretty much agrees with that. I also enjoyed the supporting cast, like Maddie. Maddie was fun, and the final confrontation between Sonic and Dr. Robotnik at the very end, that was pretty intense. Generally, I think the first movie was solid. I think it was really solid. And when the second movie came out in 2022, about 2 years later, I liked this one a lot too. There was something about it, though, that was a little different from the first one. I know they were focusing more on Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and there were less humans, right? So it was going to be a bit more different, especially since they're bringing in more elements from the games. I like that they're bringing in more elements from the games. I mean, it's a Sonic movie. There should be elements from the games. But at the same time, I also don't want it to be a beat-for-beat retelling of the games because, well, I've already experienced that before. Sonic 2 is basically the closest thing we're going to get to Sonic 3 and Knuckles the movie. And I'm glad it took different approaches. I'm glad it took liberties because, like I said, I don't want to see the same thing again, but, you know, worse than the original product, which usually most of the time does it better anyway. So if I'm gonna be going into a movie, I do want to see it being done differently. And of course, with the second movie, there's the whole wedding scene. Yeah, that was a pace breaker. I don't mind the humans. I like the human characters. I love Sonic X. I think Sonic and humans go together very well. I am not opposed to humans at all. It's just about the utilization. This includes Sonic characters. You can have all the Anthro characters here in this movie or in this universe, and if they don't do anything, they're just dead weight, and they could ruin the pacing. So they have to be smarter about that. And this is where I think movie 3 really shines, because I think they took into account what people had to say about movie 2. It really looked like they listened. They listened. That's what I love about the team behind the Sonic movies. They listen to fan feedback. They really appreciate what people who love this series have to say. I mean, remember when the whole first design got revealed back in 2019 and they had to delay the movie until 2020? Well, actually, it's only 3 months. It wasn't really that long, but yeah, they slightly delayed the movie, and it essentially created a ripple effect of goodwill between the movie studio and the audience, and Sonic fans especially. The team behind the movies respecting the source material, I think, is what makes these movies so special. Now, regarding the Sonic movies, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not the biggest fan of Sonic being a kid. I mean, that's okay. Like I said, I don't want it to be a beat-for-beat retelling of the original source material, just be respectful of it. Sonic being a kid is fine, but him being tied down to one place and having to learn to be a leader is not the Sonic that I know. The Sonic I know is already a natural-born leader, a character who doesn't really have that much self-doubt. He's a character that others look up to. He's not a follower. In the movies, Sonic is a follower. Sonic needs acceptance. Sonic needs to go through a arc of growth. But I get why they took that approach, because you can't really take that Sonic from the games, the confident leader from the games, the one that's always taking charge. In order to make an interesting character in a movie, the character needs to learn, the character needs to grow, the character needs to fuck up sometimes. And that's what we get to see in these movies. So how does this tie into Sonic Movie 3? Well, basically, this movie is the closest thing we're going to get to Sonic Adventure 2, the movie, but that's the very thing. It's a movie, and it has to build off of what the previous movies have already established. So that means some changes will have to be made. And they made lots of changes that I think are actually very interesting and creative. So, as a basic recap of the movie, it starts off with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles enjoying themselves with Tom and Maddie. They're basically celebrating Sonic's anniversary on Earth. They wanted to show just how much Sonic has meant to them. And while all this is happening, Shadow wakes up from a military base just outside of Japan. And he immediately is angry. He attacks the soldiers that were guarding his stasis pod, and he starts rampaging in Tokyo. So, without missing a beat, Gun interrupts the family moment that Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Tom, and Maddie are having, and they basically enlist them for their help in stopping Shadow. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles then travel to Tokyo in a helicopter, and in like the span of 30 seconds, they make a Sonic Adventure 2 reference and a Sonic Heroes reference. Sonic literally says, "Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies, I'm out of here." And then Sonic and Tails basically grab onto each other and make the Team Sonic formation that they did in Sonic Heroes for a brief second. That was just really cool, the attention to detail and the fan service. They didn't need to put that there, but it was there, and it was really cool. So, they immediately meet Shadow, and Sonic and Shadow are both very confused as to why they look like each other. Now, we don't really get any answers. We just kind of learn that Shadow landed on Earth in a meteorite or something like that. It's really strange, because in this version of the movie, Shadow is not a creation by Gerald Robotnik. He's basically there in the gun base being studied, and there he befriends Maria Robotnik, who is not terminally ill in this version. She is very much healthy, very much alive, active, and very, very happy. Her playfulness and her happiness has a positive effect on Shadow, who was initially unsure about who he was or what his purpose was. He was very self-conscious about himself and his role on Earth. For example, there was a point where Maria and Shadow were watching a movie in the 70s, like a kaiju movie. And yeah, the 70s, because this was 50 years ago as of 2024. So I guess it was supposed to take place in 1974. They were watching a kaiju movie, and the movie was called The Alien Freak Attacks or something like that. And that made Shadow kind of upset. It made him think that that's what humans think of him. And from there, that allowed us to get a really nice scene of Maria and Shadow bonding under the stars, with Maria comforting him, basically saying it doesn't matter what you were or where you came from. All that matters is that you are my friend, and you have the power to shape the future of what you want to be. Shadow and Maria were stargazing, and it got Maria to talk about the stars briefly, basically saying the stars that they're looking at may no longer even exist anymore, but their light is still reaching them. And that really stuck with Shadow. So we get Shadow and Maria's flashback broken up and sprinkled throughout the movie, basically as we learn more about Shadow. And from here, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles could not beat Shadow. We got a really cool action scene of Sonic chasing Shadow on his motorcycle but Shadow ultimately overpowers Sonic. And then immediately after that, we get some much needed exposition in a Chow Garden, a Japanese cafe. It's actually really cool, man. The fan service here was over the top. Like I said, I grew up in the 90s and 2000s, so the Chow Garden means a lot to me. I used to play that shit all the time as a kid. But it's really funny that we were getting some really dark exposition on Shadow in this really cutesy cafe. That was actually perfectly crafted. So basically, all of a sudden, the Chow Cafe is attacked by Robotnik drones. And then, out of nowhere, a biker stops the drones, and he reveals himself to be Agent Stone, and basically says, hey, we kind of need your help, because we don't really want this guy running around either. So he takes Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles to Dr. Robotnik, who has really let himself go. And after they meet Dr. Robotnik, he's very much enraged that his technology was used without his permission. He believes that there's an imposter, so it's up to Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Dr. Robotnik, and Agent Stone to find the source of who is using his egg drones. He's able to track down the source of where they came from, then they go to an abandoned facility, and they meet with Gerald Robotnik. Now, this is where things get even more different. In this universe, Gerald is very much alive. He hasn't died. In fact, this fucker is 110 years old, and he can still dance, he can still hear, he's in very good shape considering his age. And immediately he starts playing into Dr. Robotnik's insecurities about growing up as an orphan. Basically, he's able to get Dr. Robotnik, Ivo Robotnik, he's able to get him to do what he wants because he knows that's basically what Robotnik wanted. Ivo wanted love, and it was kind of creating a wedge between Agent Stone and Ivo. It was actually kind of sad, really sad to see Agent Stone, who actually cares for Dr. Robotnik, to basically be so torn on having his idol taken away from him. After this, you could see this coming from a mile away. Dr. Robotnik and Gerald team up, and they betray Sonic. So then the next part of the movie takes place in the UK, where I think the pacing of the movie kind of slows down a bit, not to the same levels as The Wedding, but it does slow down a fair amount. Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Tom, Maddie, Shadow, Gerald, and Ivo are all there, and they're all trying to get into the same place to get the key before Gunn does. They don't end up getting the key, but Tom uses this little device to transform his appearance into that of Commander Walters and retrieves the key successfully. Shadow then runs into Tom, disguised as Commander Walters, and nearly kills him. And Sonic then arrives on the scene right after and is absolutely livid. Sonic is overcome with grief, he's overcome with anger, and he doesn't know what to do with it. He's basically transforming into the same character that Shadow is. He's angry at Tails and Knuckles. There's a brief part where Sonic and Knuckles basically have a huge disagreement on how the Master Emerald should be used. Knuckles thinks that it should always be protected and it shouldn't be misused no matter what. And Sonic is saying, yeah, screw that noise. We kind of need to use this right now. It's our last option. It's our last resort. Knuckles eventually gives in to Sonic and basically says, okay, listen, man, I don't agree with you, but I trust you. And Sonic basically takes the Master Emerald from fucking Wade Whipple, who's using it as a hockey puck. Yeah, dude is really doing a good job protecting that shit. And then he transforms into Super Sonic and immediately attacks Shadow, Gerald, and Robotnik, who have launched the Eclipse Cannon, by the way, into space. Super Sonic is basically attacking, he goes through, he breaks through the Eclipse Cannon, which was powered by Shadow, to basically destroy the Earth. Super Sonic fucking barrels through there and starts attacking Shadow, and then he brings his ass down to Earth, and there's a brief part where Sonic loses his powers, and they both run back towards the Master Emerald, and they both turn super. And then so we get a really cool scene of Super Sonic versus Super Shadow fighting in a very Dragon Ball-esque style. It is really, really cool. And then from here, we learn that Gerald Robotnik is pretty much the fucked up guy that we knew from the games. He's very much driven by revenge. He just like Shadow. He basically tells Ivo, like, yeah, you're no Maria. And that basically made Ivo wake up, and that made Ivo become part of the good guys at the very end. So Robotnik and Gerald are fighting each other, and it's really funny. But while they are fighting, Sonic and Shadow basically take their fight to the moon, and then Shadow loses his super form and says, hey, you should just kill me, get it over with. You're angry too, you understand me, so just finish me off, I lost. And then Sonic realized that he became the person he set out to stop. And Sonic spared Shadow's life, and that moved Shadow. That made Shadow realize what he was doing was wrong too, and it's not what Maria would have wanted. And he was basically being manipulated by Gerald the entire time. So after this, Sonic and Shadow both teamed up, they went super, and they went to stop the Eclipse Cannon. They tried moving it, but it still wasn't enough to stop it. And instead of the games where Shadow lost his grip of everything and lost his power and started falling to Earth, that was Sonic. Sonic was the one falling towards Earth, and it was up to Shadow and Robotnik to end up saving humanity. And so at the very end of the movie, we get something very similar to that of the ending of Sonic Adventure 2, where Shadow sacrifices himself, including Dr. Robotnik, who basically said, hey, if I can't conquer the planet, I might as well save it. Because Gerald wanted to destroy the planet. Dr. Robotnik was against that because he wanted to rule it. He was basically like, well, if I don't have a planet to rule over, what is my purpose? I need to have something. I can't have nothing. Oh, and to make it even darker, Gerald said not only would the planet be destroyed, but so would they. He was on a, I don't know if I could say that word on YouTube, S-word mission. Yeah, he was gonna take himself out along with Shadow and Ivo because he's just gone that mad, that insane. And so, because of that, at the very end of the movie, we learn that Gerald actually is twisted just like his video game counterpart, or at least what he turns into. But Jesus Christ, he was planning on taking himself out. He didn't give a fuck. And because Ivo didn't agree with that, Ivo basically became a good guy, or at least teamed up with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and basically sacrificed himself along with Shadow to save humanity. And afterwards, we see Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Tom, and Maddie basically in the same setting that they were at the very beginning of the movie. And Tom has a broken arm, he's fine, he's all good, no worries with him. And yeah, happy ending. And we have 2 post-credit scenes that I have to talk about. So, again, spoilers if you made it this far and you don't want to know, but in the very first post-credit scene, we see Sonic we basically see Sonic making his way to New York because of the race he was having with Tails and Knuckles. He went a bit too far, apparently, and he's attacked by an army of Metal Sonics. And then Sonic is then saved by Amy, who is cloaked. She looks really cool. I really like her design, and it's about damn time we got Amy in the movies. I think Amy has been a glaring omission for a long time now. We needed Amy. I think it's really cool that she's finally going to be in the movies, and I can't wait to see what she does. And that was the mid-credits sequence, and then in the very end with the post-credits, we see that Shadow is actually alive. He survived the explosion that was supposed to kill him and Ivo Robotnik. So, let's talk about the good. The good is the utilization of these characters, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Shadow, and Gerald, and Ivo Robotnik, and Maria even. Sure, they may not be one-to-one with that of the games, but these are very solid takes on the characters. Like I said, this version of Sonic isn't my favorite, but this version of Shadow, I think, is one of the best, if not the best, depiction we've had of Shadow ever. I love this version of Shadow that much. He's so fucking cool. And the confidence in the source material that this movie has is amazing. And Gerald Robotnik, just seeing how much he manipulated Ivo into playing into his insecurities and taking advantage of that just to get him close to him and basically make him become his lackey until it's too late. God, this version of Gerald is such an asshole. But God, I love him. He's such an asshole. He's such a villain that you love to hate. And this is something I wish we got a little more of, but Maria and Shadow. Maria and Shadow's moments where they were playing, where they were bonding, roller skating, and watching movies, and dude, it was adorable. This was something we never got to see in the games. It was kind of just mostly told rather than shown, you know, their bond in the games. But here, we actually get to see it, and so Shadow's trauma and Maria's death hits even harder, because we got a chance to see the bond between these characters play out. It's really important when you show rather than tell. And this movie really wanted you to know about the bond between Maria and Shadow. It was done very well, and I just wish that we got more of that. And like I said, there are some changes in this movie. Here, Shadow is not a genetic experiment, Maria is not terminally ill, and Gerald does not end up dying. However, they're still able to hit the main character beats for Shadow while making these changes, and I think it's all for the better for this medium. I think it really works out in its favor. I think these are necessary changes that needed to be made when adapting it to film. And it's a great different take on this story that I've known for 23 years now. It's a breath of fresh air. And lastly, what I really liked was Sonic ultimately becoming what he set out to stop by the end of the movie, or at least the third act. He became angry, he became vengeful, he attacked Shadow, basically in the same way that Shadow attacked Tokyo and everyone around him. And that's what ultimately made the two understand each other. And this is something that we never really saw in the games. This was a great moment for Sonic and Shadow. Sonic especially, since he's depicted more as like a child in these movies. But it was a great moment for growth for Sonic. It was a moment that he needed, because he never experienced anything like this before, and part of becoming a great leader is experiencing pain, gaining wisdom through many life experiences, good and bad. And this is something I think that's going to stick with Sonic in the future installments. Now, the bad parts of the movie. Like I said, there are a few things I did not like. Like the pacing in the movie was a little slow, especially when they're in the UK. But you know, it's the middle part. You know, you're gonna have hills and valleys. It happens. You can't have nonstop action. You gotta have moments to breathe. But damn, I really wanted to get right back into the action. What I ultimately didn't like the most about this movie was Shadow's fake out death. I think that was a way to get a cheap reaction out of the audience. I think that the movie should have never have done that if it couldn't commit. I especially since they revealed 5 minutes later that Shadow's alive. We didn't get a chance to see Sonic reflect on Shadow's death. We didn't see Tails, anybody reflect on the death of Shadow. It was just mostly for the audience. Hell, when Shadow and Robotnik died, it was just Agent Stone who was mourning Dr. Robotnik. Nobody mourned Shadow. Shadow could have survived. We could have seen him survive, and it wouldn't have changed anything. So that's why I think it was a little cheap. I wish they never would have done that, especially since the games did that, and they tried to stick to Shadow dying, but they ultimately couldn't do it. But so here, I was hoping that they would learn from the games and not try to do that. But, you know, I guess it's just part of Shadow at this point, right? He sacrifices himself, but he's too cool to kill, right? So that is something that I would have changed about the movie. Like I said, him dying at the end doesn't really make a big difference. He could have just survived, and it would have been the same outcome. And you know, after talking about the seriousness of the movie, I completely forgot to mention the humor in the movie. Gerald Robotnik and Ivo Robotnik were very funny, yes, but I think the funniest character in the movie was Knuckles, especially when they were going into the the abandoned gun laboratory and the whole Casper scene with Agent Stone asking him if he's afraid of ghosts. That was the funniest bit. That was what made me laugh the hardest. And just yesterday or the day before, we got the announcement that Sonic the Hedgehog 4 is coming. And I'm really looking forward to Amy and Metal Sonic. Amy has been one of my favorite Sonic characters since I was a little kid. And it's going to be really cool to see her on the big screen. And let's be real, I feel like this film franchise needed to break up the cast with Amy, who's, I'd say, the most prominent female Sonic character in the entire franchise. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how they handle her. I don't know if they're going to treat her like the Meta era does, or if she's going to be more like how she was in the Adventure era. But I don't think there's anything wrong with Amy saving Sonic. She should be capable of that. She's a hero, but she should still be able to love Sonic. You know, I made a video on Amy and her love for Sonic. If you want to see that, I will link that at the very end of the video here. But that's basically all I have to say about this movie. Have you seen it yet? If you did, what did you think of it? Who was your favorite character, and are you gonna go see it again? Because, dude, I keep thinking about this movie. I need to see it again. It is so fucking cool. And with that, those are basically all my thoughts. Let me know yours, and I'll catch you guys next time. Matinee.